and welcome to Your Health DeKoded. When disaster strikes, whether it's a plane crash, a building collapse, a train derailment, or an industrial explosion, we hear from aviation experts, from engineers, other investigators. But what about doctors? The medical professionals who face the aftermath, who make life and death decisions in minutes, who see the injuries that textbooks perhaps have never prepared them for. The recent air crash in Ahmedabad is a huge testament to perhaps what is needed in terms of medical help after a disaster happens. Unfortunately, in that case, there was only one survivor. But there are many, many disasters that we've seen where perhaps immediate and the right kind of medical attention and follow-ups would have saved a lot of lives. So today on Your Health DeKoded, that's what we will be discussing. And I have with me Dr. Vandana Singh, who's an aviation expert, Dr. Kamna Chhibber, a psychologist, and Dr. Preetam Gaikwad, who's the head of emergency medicine at Fortis Hiranandani Hospital. Thank you all for joining us today. I actually just wanted to start because there has been so much talk about the recent crash, and like I said, unfortunately, there was just one survivor. One wishes there were many, many more people, and our heart goes out to those people who died that day. But if I could start with you, Dr. Gaikwad, in terms of the immediate help that is needed when these disasters happen, what is recommended and how is it different from when a patient comes into emergency?
Thank you. So, considering this particular scenario, whenever there is a disaster kind of situation, it also depends upon what kind of disaster situation we are talking about. In this particular case, it was the aviation disaster, which is a comparatively very high velocity trauma and was also accompanied by jet fuel burn injuries. So, obviously, the triaging takes a major role in this, and whichever team reaches to the disaster site first has a very significant role of triaging the patients as to understanding who is going to need the majority of the help and who have the best possibility of survival. So that is where the role of triaging comes in. And if we have a good triaging system, we can understand who has a better chance of survival and whom do we need to give an immediate care and needs to be transported urgently to a tertiary care hospital where they have a dedicated trauma unit and can deal with any kind of traumatic situations.
So you spoke of a good triage. Does our country in many places, do places have a good triage system? And also in most places, how do you manage, let's say, a 50, 100 casualties when you possibly have resources just for 20 or 30?
So obviously, a good triaging is a bit of a challenge. Technically speaking, whenever there is a disaster situation, the nearby hospital do get a call that so and so disaster has happened, and you might be expecting patients. That is where the hospitals have a system of having a code disaster kind of situation, in which the whole hospital staffs are being informed that we are expecting a mass casualty. A lot of patients with traumatic injuries are expected, and everyone is prepared. So in hospital wise speaking, there are a lot of changes. The pharmacy, the OTs, the doctors team, orthopedics, everyone gets involved, and they're collectively come together to sort of help and triage the patient and receive them. Considering the level of triaging in our country, it is a bit challenging to say, because not all the hospitals are quite well equipped and not everyone is on par with the knowledge as to required triage levels. So that is where we face a major challenge in understanding, having a good triage system and equipment, each and every medical personnel, even the paramedics, with understanding the situation and triaging them to prioritize them who needs to be transported first to the hospital to have a better chance of survival.
It's very interesting that you spoke of paramedics. I mean, for instance, let's say in the air crash that happened recently or other air crashes, what is the difference in, let's say, a jet fuel burn injury than a normal burn injury? And are medical professionals, do they know the difference? Are they equipped to deal with it right from the stage of paramedics all the way to the hospital?
So for us, medically speaking, we will receive them as burn injuries only. So what we do, we do not separate them mainly from the burn injury. The only difference is that the jet fuel has a very high burning capacity and they're highly ignitable. So that is where the jet fuel comes in and plays sort of making it another worst case scenario. For us, when we receive the patient, it always we consider it as always burns, and depending upon the level of burns, we have to treat them. If it's a level 1 burn, level 2, or level 3 burn, which is going to need a further dedicated burn unit.
Right. Dr. Singh, if I can come to you, speaking of, again, I keep referring back to Ahmedabad because I think it's so fresh in all our minds. Are airports in our country equipped to handle sort of mass casualties? This happened so near an airport. If there was something at the airport, do you think it could have helped, or could you tell us a little more about that?
First of all, thank you for having me on your show. And as I said, I read you Strength 5. The answer to this question is no, unfortunately not. We are a vast country. We have about 279 airports, out of which 74 odd are functional. The rest still have to become fully functional. So now when you look at the major metros, you look at Mumbai, you look at New Delhi, you look at the other metros, you look at Chennai, you look at Bangalore, you look at Hyderabad, you look at these cities, tier A, that we say the big metros. Near the airport, you don't have something like that. You have disaster management teams, but to handle casualties that big, no. I think there is a lot of room for improvement. I think we can get much better, much faster, much quicker. Of course, the crash at Ahmedabad, the disaster team very quickly responded to it, did whatever they could do. But I think Dr. Gaikwad will also agree with me. Even as we speak, the DNA testing is still not complete. There are still people waiting in the queue there, really waiting to take whatever is left of their loved and near ones. Now we are talking of Ahmedabad. So disaster teams are there, but are we there? I don't think so. My answer is no to this, and I'll be very clear about it. A lot needs to be done by us to really have that facility where it is very, very quick action. Now we remember, sorry.
Please go ahead. You were saying.
I'll just say one thing. I mean, everybody recollects the bird strike that happened, and everybody has seen the movie Sully and what happened on the Hudson River. We all know that, the miracle landing that happened that saved all the lives. But in this case, you see how quickly all the teams, including LAPD, whatever was there, New York, everything, whether choppers, whether ships, whether ferries, whether boats, it came on very quickly because it was very cold water. They saved people from hypothermia and everybody survived. But if you ask me, we have this kind of situation in India. I don't think so that we'll be able to react the way they did. So we have a lot of room for improvement.
So it's very interesting. You said that there is a lot more to be done. But if we just sort of pull back a little and just talk about emergencies inside flights, are airline crews trained to deal with emergency situations, like a medical emergency?
Yes, ma'am, they are trained to deal with emergencies. But if it's a critical medical emergency, you always see that the captain is always looking for the nearest airport or landing the flight closest wherever an air ambulance can be called and the passenger can be safely taken to the nearest hospital possible. Of course, for ailments as such, they have full equipment on board, including if somebody is feeling breathless or they need oxygen or they need some kind of a CPR and things like that. But for something that gets critical, they immediately need to go to the nearest airport. We all know that. Or they are immediately announcing, is there any medical personnel on board? Please come up. It's seat 34C, Charlie, for example. please come up, and then they try to do whatever they can to just keep it going till they go to the nearest airport. So this is a scenario as we speak. If there is no doctor on board, then they call for anybody who's a paramedic to come on board, to come forward, or if there's a nurse, anybody from nursing staff to come forward, or anybody who can help to come forward. This is the way the protocol goes. They have the basic kits, but when it's an emergency, then the pilot has to look for the nearest airport and go and arrange and make arrangements that very quickly the patient is taken by an ambulance to the nearest hospital for whatever the criticality may be.
Right. Dr. Chhibber, I think after the initial bit, after people are taken to hospitals and they recover, I think after that, dealing with it perhaps becomes even more important than the initial physical recovery. Would you speak to our audience about what is the kind of trauma, disaster, or these big accident victims go through?
I think it's extremely important to understand that individuals who would experience something which is as devastatingly traumatic, such as this, it would really be impacting them in multiple ways. For most people, the most easily visible signs would be for their physical health, but what often gets neglected is what is happening to them at a mental and an emotional level. And if you try to understand that, often there is a continuing re-experiencing of the situation. People usually tend to revisit the entire situation in their own minds. They would have vivid imagery, vivid thought processes, a lot of anxious thoughts, worries, concerns. Often they end up having a lot of consequential thinking, which could be very extreme, where they would imagine scenarios which have not happened, but they fear that what if something even worse now happens. So for a lot of individuals, it becomes extremely difficult to just pick up and move forward. Something which is an expectation that often families or friends may have, that, okay, fine, yes, you went through this, you may be coming out of it, but now you need to pick up on life and you need to start moving forward and doing what your routines involved, or going back into your work, into your social situations. But it is extremely hard and challenging because of the constant thought process, emotional impact that this has had on the individual. And the fears can really take grip of an individual. And from a physiological standpoint, if you're looking at it, we also need to understand that basic functions like sleep, appetite, often get really severely affected as well. So your ability to perform in different roles gets automatically compromised. And you need a lot of hand holding, a lot of gentle nudging, which would be helpful in the long run to be able to enable this individual to restart moving forward. And this is something which would also be impacting people around them. So it's not just the trauma, it's the re-traumatizing experience that can also keep on happening for people who've been through some of these situations, which could compromise their mental well-being over a longitudinal period of time.
So what do you recommend? Because, we're in a country where even now sometimes going to therapy or getting help is considered a taboo. So what would you recommend?
See, I think we need to understand 2-3 points, aspects over here. One, every individual would not need to go and meet a mental health professional. We also don't have the number of experts to be able to support that kind of a requirement. We are a very large country with a very large population, and there is a disproportionate distribution of mental health experts around the country as well. So we also need to understand that the care that needs to be provided, or the mental health support that needs to be provided, needs to be a multi-pronged approach. One part of it is going to be something which needs to be looked after through friends and family who are immediately surrounding this individual. So can we bring in an understanding which is some sort of a psychological first aid to be able to utilize and equip ourselves with the skills to be able to support this individual adequately. So not going ahead and questioning their experiences, not being dismissive about their emotions, reminding them that, yes, they've been through something which is extremely difficult. It will take them time, but to keep on trying to work towards figuring out what they can do to take care of themselves. So bringing in that support system and identifying wherein there could be certain indicators to suggest that there is actually a mental health related illness which is developing, which is when a referral can be made. So every individual need not go to a mental health expert in the first instance. Families and friends can form a very, very good supportive network. The second aspect is, given that not everyone would have an easy access to mental health expert, we also need to increase the utilization of helplines. There are varying helplines which are being run, which are both by the government, which are also by certain private sector organizations, which must be utilized adequately. And this information should be immediately provided and disseminated to individuals who may have gone through certain disaster situations. And that needs to form a second line of support in a way where, in the immediate aftermath of a situation, you may not be able to necessarily reach out to an expert, but at least you have access to some experts who would be able to help you deal with the immediate crisis and trauma. And then comes your third line of looking at the experts who you can then reach out to. Telemental health is one of the biggest solutions for something like this. And I think that is something that we really need to embrace and understand. It has been a huge boon in being able to provide help, support, care, intervention to individuals who are in very far-flung parts of the country. And I think that is where some of these pieces all need to come together. It's the integrated approach which is important and which would be really beneficial, but that can only be utilized if there is adequate dissemination of information, whether it's about experts, whether it's about helplines, whether it's about, okay, what can families do? There need to be these guidelines which can be provided, which could be a useful aid for individuals and would actually help them cope with something like this.
Right. Dr. Gaikwad, it's, when a doctor is at a disaster site, it could be a natural disaster, it could be an accident. Speak to our audience about what is the biggest and the most difficult decision that they have to make. Is it, choosing who to save and who to let go of? What is that biggest, decision?
So, whenever on-field triaging is done, it is always a difficult task. You have to understand, you have to keep your emotions aside and think about logically as to who needs to be survived first. There are going to be many in a disaster situation. There are going to be many people who will most likely not make it even to the hospital. So that is the main challenge, where you have to understand that this person may not even make it to the hospital. On the other hand, the other person who has still a better survival chance has to be given a priority to shift to the hospital. So that is the most challenging situation, making decisions on the triaging field.
Right. Dr. Chhibber, when I was asking Dr. Gaikwad this question, I also remembered that so many of these victims who survive also have something called survivor's guilt. And it's being spoken about a lot. So can you tell us a little more about that?
See, I think for a lot of people who end up being survivors of a disastrous experience or something which has been extremely traumatic and led to widespread devastation around, yes, there are individuals who may wonder about how is it that I was the individual who has not been compromised in this situation. And it's not just stemming from this aspect of how is it that I survived. It also comes from the aspect that could I have done something differently, which could have helped other people as well? What could have been a different choice that I may have made in that situation? Could I have held on to the arm of another and pulled them out? Could I have tried to do something which could have provided another person who was struggling to survive in that moment, and I could have probably ensured that they were okay? So for a lot of individuals, that kind of a complex thought process can often take hold, where they keep wondering and replaying in their mind the entire scenario of how was it that they were able to navigate and negotiate the different situations that evolved when they were that or that entire episode in time. And when they're looking at it, there is a part of the mind which is also assessing and evaluating and judging what could have been done differently. And when there are people who raise questions around them, which is often, a way in which people think that they're going to be supportive, that, they'll ask them, they'll check on them, they'll ask them to, share what the experience was. It actually sometimes makes them reflect and introspect too much, which can also then lead to the creation of almost these doubts within the mind to say that, should I have done something differently? Should I have done something more? Could my action have actually saved other people? So I think, which is where it is extremely important as people who are around another individual to tell them that if they would like to share, that you're there to listen, but you don't have to coax them or keep on asking them multiple prying questions which make them revisit that experience, because that is re-traumatizing in its own way.
Right. So, as we come to the end of this show, I wanted to know from all three of you, what are, if you were to speak about the top three things that you would like to see fixed in dealing with disasters in our country, what would they be? Dr. Singh, if I could start with you.
Firstly, as I mentioned, of course, when it comes to dealing with disasters, the first thing is that the proximity, the finest medical team availability, the equipment, all of that has to be there, because these disasters can happen anytime. After all, we are in a service industry. When it comes to aviation safety, when it comes to train tragedies, when it comes to road tragedies, first thing you're looking for is what is the quick response team action. So really, there should be improvement in that, and we really need to focus on that. Secondly, from my perspective, moving a little bit away from now the medical disaster, I do believe that the airline crew as such has to be absolutely trained A class. There has to be no stone left unturned when it comes to, let's say, crew resource management as such, because you have to move from technical to non-technical skills. And where is the resilience under stress, for example, or the human factor, what are the team dynamics? I think the industry really needs to focus on this as well, and it could be any industry, not just aviation, it is the other industries as well, where you really need to focus on the people, the human resources, the human factors that come into play. What are the leadership qualities? What are the team dynamics? How quick is the response? So from my side, these two factors are most important, because at the end of the day, it's about human skills. It's about us. It's about people. And really, we need to have a balance between what we are taking from artificial intelligence and what we are taking from ourselves. It should not be that AI is overruling us. It is we who should know how to draw that fine line or that fine balance. And I think these are the three most important factors. If you over rely on AI, then you're doing something actually wrong when it comes to aviation safety, at least. We cannot afford to do that. We're seeing accidents happen also because of that. So these are my 3 points.
Right. Thanks for that, Dr. Gaikwad.
The first thing that which we need to understand is that disasters can happen anywhere. So it is not only the metropolitan city that have to be well equipped, but even the remote places should have patients get the triaging done, assess the situation, and inform the authorities and guide them to a proper center. So that is where we need to have a proper detailed area of evaluation of triaging and distribution of resources to the specific locations for managing the disaster well.
Okay, Dr. Chhibber, over to you.
Thank you. I think a couple of things that come to mind immediately. Of course, physical health and making sure that individuals are physically fine is the topmost priority in that moment in case of any disaster. However, I do feel that it's very important and integral to ensure that information that pertains to how you can take care of your mental well-being, what are the resources that are going to be available to you in the aftermath of an experience or a situation like this is extremely critical. So provision of information, provision of that knowledge to individuals who've been impacted by that situation is extremely critical. I think the second aspect is that there needs to be a lot of training in psychological first aid, which should be brought into our systems and processes especially for first responders across the board, because I think that is something which is very, very crucial when it comes to looking at mental health and mental well-being. And the third aspect would be that I think in the midst of all of this, yes, we are talking about the people who are directly impacted, but there is also a lot of impact which is there on families and communities. And there is vicarious trauma also, which does get created. So there is a need to keep on talking about what is it that can be done to take care of your own self, especially for the families and friends or community members of those who have been lost in this process, in this particular situation or any situation which is a disaster. So I think this three-pronged approach is something which probably we need to keep on working towards. There are steps which are being taken, but there is always scope for more to make systems more comprehensive and better and effective.
Right. Thank you all so much. I think this is all such important information that largely people don't realize, but it is important to know that what that first response should be, how effective it should be, and what all is needed to strengthen our systems to make sure that we can save as many lives as possible. So thank you so much. That's it this week on Your Health Decoded. See you next week.